All right, here we go. Okay, here we go. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight and being patient with me while I adjust tech issues and click all the right buttons, make sure we have everyone in the meeting tonight that should be here. We are so glad that you could join us for tonight's virtual event, a Bush Family Holiday. Troy Gray is with us tonight from one of our newest historic sites, the Bush Family Home in Midland, Texas. I'm Christy Poliquin, the Development Manager for the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission. We're so glad you've stopped by, and I always want to encourage you to get to know more about us and the work that we do to support the Texas Historical Commission. We provide philanthropic support for programs and historic sites all across Texas. So we would love for you to get to know more about us by visiting our website. It's thcfriends.org. I also want to thank those of you who have chosen to support us with donations. Please know I see each and every donation that comes through, and I am grateful for every single one of those. Those donations go directly to support programs, and we're able to make a lot of good things happen because of you. So thank you so much. I want to acknowledge our THC commissioners, our Friends board members, as well as some of our colleagues at the Texas Historical Commission who are here with us tonight. Always a good time to see you. If you haven't already, we would love for you to follow us on social media. This is how you can find out about other programming that we have coming up. We do take a break in January from these particular virtual events, but we will be back in February. On February 1st, we're going to be doing a virtual event called One of the Best States of All, which is a quote from Russell Lee, the famous photographer. So as you've probably guessed, our February 1st event will be about Russell Lee. It'll be delivered by a biographer of his named Mary Jane Apple. I think I've got that correct. If you don't know Russell Lee's photographs, definitely take a look at those. They are incredible. Okay, but a few housekeeping items before I hand it over to Troy. As always, we would appreciate it if you could keep your microphones on mute. That just helps us focus on our presenter. And when we get to the Q&A session, if there's an opportunity for you to come off mute, I'll invite you to do that. We do try to put the questions for the Q&A session into the chat while the presentation is going on. And then as soon as the presentation is over, we'll answer those in the order that we've received them in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can before 7:30. I always tell people we get to 7:30, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. So we have to end it at some point. Tomorrow after the event, I will send you all an email, everyone who's registered for the event, with a link to a recording of tonight's event, as well as links to the site where Troy is and any other resources that Troy might mention tonight. So watch your email for that. Please know sometimes our emails go to spam or your junk folder. So if you don't receive it, check that folder, okay? Is that everything? I think so. I feel like I've been talking a long time. It is now my privilege to introduce our presenter for tonight, who is coming to us. I think I already said this, but he's coming to us from Midland, Texas, which is a great town. If you haven't visited Midland anytime recently, definitely go out there again. Troy Gray is the site manager of the Bush Family Home. He became the site manager in January of 2023. He was chosen after 16 years of experience working in various museums in Waco, Temple, and Beaumont. His love of history, especially presidential history, began with a trip to Washington, D.C. as an elementary school student. Troy has a Master's of Arts in History from Baylor University, and his last position was as the director of the Spindletop Gladys City Boomtown Museum. Boy, that's a mouthful. Which is always very interesting to me because I think the history of Spindletop is fascinating. So Troy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are excited to hear all about one of THC's newest historic sites, the Bush Family Home.
Thank you for having me tonight. All right, well, as she said, I have been at the home only since January this year. It's been exciting to be at the very front of it, to be under the TAC. So I finally found a site that really uses my love of presidential history. This has been really great all year. Um, well, what I want to do today is to share some of the family's Christmas pictures, as well as tell the story of the home and why it's special to Texas history and, of course, American history. I hope you enjoy our conversation today. Christmas was always a great holiday for the Bushes. George H.W. Bush actually met Barbara Pierce at the 1941 Christmas dance at the Greenwich Country Club. Bush learned that Barbara was going to another dance the next evening, and Bush found a way to be at the dance also. When he turned 18 the next June, he signed up to be the youngest naval pilot during World War II. As he was away, both H.W. and Barbara kept in contact with each other, and in fact, he named his airplanes the Barbara. In September of 1944, Bush was shot down over Japan, but luckily the USS Finback, an American submarine, rescued him. Other pilots that were captured were tortured, and some were even eaten by the Japanese soldiers. So H.W. often teased Barbara that he almost became an hors d'oeuvre. Barbara and George, they married in January of 1945 while he was on leave. The war ended before he can return to combat. So he entered Yale, the same university as his father, and graduated with a degree of economics in 2.5 years. It was at Yale that George W. was born. And then when he graduated, many of the family members wanted him to go and work for their business, or his father was in banking. He actually had 2 offers from Wall Street. But the Bushes had this mindset that if you want to show what you're made of, you have to go out there and do it on your own. So a family friend, Neil Mallon, invited George to West Texas and said that if you start at the bottom of the oil industry and work yourself up, you're going to learn some very valuable skills in a very valuable industry. So that is what they decided to do. Here's another early Christmas picture of the Bushes. This is their dog Turbo. Turbo went to live with Barbara's parents when they moved to Texas. And in an interview, in her own words, she said that unfortunately Turbo committed suicide by jumping off the deck. So poor Turbo, but it seems they almost always had dogs in their lives. The Bushes first moved to Odessa where they lived in 3 different houses. The job had a $375 a month salary. This picture shows them in Christmas of 1948. George W. was 2.5. This house still stands, but was moved onto the property of the Presidential Museum, run now by the L&O Art Museum in Odessa. Not this house, but the first house that they lived in Odessa was actually a duplex that they shared with a mother-daughter prostitute team, and the Johns would often lock them out of the shared bathroom. So they started off really humble and try to work themselves up. Here's more pictures of that Christmas Day in 1948. So you can, if you visit the house in Odessa today, it's actually always decorated for Christmas. So, well, in 1949, the company Idaco sends them out to California, where they live in 4 different cities in 1 year. This is actually where their daughter Robin was born. And they actually brought Robin home from the hospital on Christmas Day. So on this Christmas, George W. got a horse, a sister, and a TV all in the same year. You can see a horse like this, the one he received in the children's playroom at the Bush family home. This horse, actually, if you get on it, you can get it to ride down the road. So it's a very interesting horse. It just came out that same year that he got it. So, and then you could also see the same model and makeup TV that they had, a 1949 Hoffman, in the living room. Here, Barbara claims that she was on the couch watching her favorite program, which was Milton Berle. And then also here's Robin. So when they returned to West Texas, they chose Midland over Odessa for a couple of reasons. One, Odessa had the everyday oil worker, and Midland had the owners in the upper crust of the oil companies. And Bush wanted to get out there on his own. Also, there was a saying that if you wanted to raise hell, you moved to Odessa, and if you wanted to raise a family, you moved to Midland. So the first house that they moved was an 850 square foot house in the area called Easter Egg Row because all the houses looked the same except for the color. And their color was light blue. One of their neighbors over there was John Overby, and John and George decided to make their own company, the Bush Overby Oil Company. Here are a couple pictures of that home on 405 East Maple. The first one is an undated photo that was taken after the Bushes lived there, and the second one is from Google Images and what it looks like today. So later, the Lipke brothers wanted to join the company, and John Overby eventually leaves the company. And the Lipke brothers and Bush were looking for a good name for their joint company that started with A or Z's, so it would be easier to find in a phone book. This was common in that day to look for names that started with A or Z, so you can be the first or last in the phone book. But there was a movie downtown with Marlon Brando called Viva Zapata, and they thought Zapata Oil was a great name for their company. Later, Zapata Oil breaks up into two, with the Lipke brothers taking the on-land oil. This eventually becomes Pennzoil. And then the Bushes take the offshore oil, which required them to move to Houston. So we finally get to the house on West Ohio Street. The original house was built in 1939 by Mildred Etheridge, who sold cigars and candy at the Scarborough Hotel, which is now located where the Doubletree Hotel is downtown Midland today. She had horses and dealt with real estate, and so she built the house for her widowed sister, and her nephew. When she built it, as you can see here, she had a one-car garage in front. So there were a total of 4 owners before the Bushes bought the house in 1951. And one of the owners, Paxton Howard, took out the garage and built a living room where with this bay window and a porch area. This expanded the space in the room. So kind of interesting is I used to work at the Bell County Museum in Belton, and I actually met Paxton Howard Jr., who was a boy when he lived in this house. So that was a very interesting coincidence for me. So when visiting the home, you can see under the bay window the cement slab. This is actually left over from the driveway when it was a garage. And then inside, you can see the fireplace and the bookshelves. And the bookshelves were where the original windows were. But Paxton Howard made those into bookshelves. So in February of 1953, Jeb was born. And if you don't know, Jeb stands for John Ellis Bush. But from the beginning, everyone just called him by his initials, Jeb. About 3 weeks after Jeb was born, Robin went to her mom and said, I think I'm just going to lay in the grass and watch the cars go by, or I'll just stay in bed. So there were some other indicators, but Barbara really didn't think that was an average thing a 3-year-old thing would the 3-year-old person would say. So she decided to take her to the local pediatrician, Dorothy Wyville, to do some tests. When the test results came back, Dr. Wyville told Barbara, don't bring Robin, bring your husband. And that's when they found out Robin had leukemia. Now, the prognosis was pretty bleak. It was the largest white blood cell count that Wyville ever saw. So trying to help out the Bushes, she told them, look, you don't have much time left. Just don't tell her, don't tell others. Just love her until she passes away. And Barbara writes that this was actually excellent advice, but they just couldn't do that as parents. And so George had an uncle who worked in the Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital up in New York. And the hospital had some breakthroughs the year before in leukemia, and they thought they had a pretty good shot up there. Now, George had it kind of hard during that time. He was traveling back and forth from New York to Midland. Of course, little George and Jed were back here, and he had a newer business he had to keep running. So it said that he went to church every morning at 6:30 to pray for Robin. Barbara stayed up there, but she demanded that anyone who visited Robin in the hospital that they could not cry in front of her. She didn't want Robin to be scared, and she only wanted Robin to see happy faces. But unfortunately, she does die in October of that year, and this year actually marked the 70th year of her death. So here's Dr. Wyville. You can see she was also Laura's pediatrician and later their daughters. In Laura's book, she says that every child in Midland seemed to have been poked, prodded, and tongue depressed by Dr. Wyville. You could also read here where actually they brought Barbara, one of the twins, to Dr. Wyville. So, but Barbara seemed to be fine. And this is Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital. Dr. John Walker actually received his job here the year before as a clinical assistant in surgery. And George H.W. said of his uncle, he was a great cancer surgeon who had been stricken with polio. He was a strong and purposeful man. And then here, when I found this picture planning this was really very good. You can see how they decorated the mantle that year with Robin's picture and angels all around. And this is kind of a close up. So it must have been a really difficult Christmas to celebrate since Robin's birthday is December 20th. So next year, we hope to decorate the mantle like this to show that really the impact of her death on the family. So here's George W. and Jet playing in the snow in 1955. I haven't seen snow like this, but I hear sometimes it happens. But in this same year, as they lived in this house on January 22nd, Neil was born. A couple more pictures. The house on the left with the snowman is next door, and the site now owns that house and the one next to it. So eventually we'll be able to create larger education exhibit spaces. So HW made his first million on the oil field and they wanted more room in the house. So they then moved to a 3,000 square foot house on Sentinel Drive. And here in 1956, they had their last son, Marvin. A couple more pictures from the house on Sentinel Drive. In the summer of 1958, George H.W. actually writes his mom a letter about how he missed Robin, sorry. And the excerpt from the letter says, "We need a legitimate Christmas angel, one who doesn't have cuffs beneath the dress. We need someone who's afraid of frogs. We need someone to cry when I get mad, not argue. We need a little one who can kiss without leaving egg or jam or gum. We need a girl." So HW then decided to go into offshore oil drilling, which required them to move to Houston. Before they left, though, Barbara becomes pregnant with Dorothy, which was an answer to George's wish in the letter to his mother. So here they are in front of the house on Sentinel Drive, and Barbara is pregnant with Dorothy in this picture. And this is the house today on Sentinel Drive. One interesting thing is George W. loved this house because they had a pool. And then he was kind of competing with a schoolgirl who also had a pool. So who had the more friends at their pool. Here are all the children on Christmas after Doral was born. That was what they called Dorothy, it was Doral. And this was in 1959. So HW and Barbara, they had over 30 different living situations in their lifetime. So to find their actual items that were in the house on Ohio, is virtually impossible. But we do have two items that have Bush stories, though. So, as we said, this house boasts two presidents, two governors, and a first lady that lived in the house. But there was another nearby first lady. Laura was born and raised in the Midland as well. She was the only child of her family, and her mother was also only child, but her grandmother had six sisters. When the restoration was being done, Laura's mother said she still has her working 1950s refrigerator in the barn, so it was taken and placed in the house. So you can see here, this is a very popular item because you can see the Lazy Susan shelves. And I also have a foot pedal that you can open the door in case your hands are full of groceries. Another item that has a Bush story is this croquet set, and this belongs to George's friend, Joe O'Neill. And Joe and George and the rest of the boys would play this exact set. It was in 1977. George was 31, and Joe had a backyard barbecue, and he invited George. And Joe's wife Jan was good friends with Laura, so she invited Laura. And this was the first time George and Laura met, and 3 months later they got married. Here are a couple more pictures of the kitchen. George W. Rice at the formal dining. That was left for when guests came over, and it was supposed to be left nice. So if a child was found in that room, he would have gotten into trouble. Um, so they mostly ate in the kitchen, and the dishes with the vine motif on the table, they were given to the Bushes as gifts. But Barbara really liked that design, had the wallpaper. Here you can see George and Jeb eating in the kitchen. The cake says happy birthday, Jeb, so it's his first birthday. And behind them, you can see a radio, which we do have a version of in the kitchen. But the radio's on top of a washer or dryer, which we looked for, but they were difficult to find. They were either in museums or the people who had them really high prices. Um, but that washer or dryer set came with a salt and pepper shaker set. So, which we did find. And when the dryer was done, it had a song called How Dry I Am, which was a song for the Prohibition, actually. Here's George W.'s room. He was 5 when he moved in and 9 when they moved out. In this house, he had his own room, but in other houses, he had to share with his brother. The knotty pine wood paneling is actually original to the house. Later owners, they added sheetrock to the walls, and then every time they rented it, they would paint the walls. So when they did the restoration, not only did they have a lot of pictures, but Barbara was really helpful in answering a lot of questions, and then she answered the survey, and then she answered more questions after the survey. So in this room, when they took off the sheetrock, the son had put up the design of the shelves so they knew how to rebuild them. Now, George W., he was an average 1950s child. His favorite movie star was Roy Rogers. And of course, this was the golden age of cowboy movies and programs. So he would dress up as a cowboy, and his friends said that they would keep the rules for the Roy Rogers fan club in their back pocket. He was one of 3 presidents that were Cub Scouts. You can see him here in his scout uniform. His mom was one of the den mothers and would take them to Carlsbad Caverns and other places. The other 2 presidents were Clinton, and Obama was part of the Indonesian Cub Scouts. And then President Ford was our only Eagle Scout, but that was a Boy Scout. So there's only 3 Cub Scouts. George W. was the first president to become president after playing Little League, and Joe Biden is our second one. Now, H.W., when he went to Yale, he was actually captain of the Yale baseball team. And as captain, he had the privilege of accepting the signed autobiography of Babe Ruth. H.W. said Babe Ruth really couldn't speak it very well because he had cancer in the throat. And shortly after this, the same year, Babe Ruth passes away. When H.W. played at Yale, the team went to the first 2 College World Series. Both of these games were played in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they were both played against 2 separate California teams, but both of them Yale loses. But these are the only two times Yale has gone to the College World Series. But when George W. was in Little League, his father was one of the coaches, and his father loved to show off in front of the boys. So he would throw the ball in the air and catch it behind his back. But when the boys tried it, they were often hit on the head and shoulders. Here you can see a couple of news articles of George W. doing the activities at the YMCA. It was actually George H.W. that helped to start the YMCA in Midland. George H.W. and Barbara, they were very active in the society while they lived here. They both taught Sunday school. They volunteered at the hospital. They did fund drives for their son's school. They helped the orchestra and theater to get started. She was part of the women's club. They did things for the United Way. So they were very active in the society here, and many people remember them. Another feature of the house is this medicine cabinet that you can find in the bathroom. And houses of this time had this hole in the medicine cabinet because people were burning their garbage and putting the ashes in the garden to help it to grow. But men couldn't put their used razors in the garden because that would have made it dangerous. So they made this hole for them to put their razors in, and that would build up in the wall. So we had one visitor who was remodeled their home, and she didn't know why there were razors in the wall until she took our tour. So you learn some things there. So by the way, we do think that all the razors were taken out when they were remodeling the house in 2000. And then this is one of the original light fixtures in the 1939 building. In fact, it's the only original light fixture that we have. And then this is another item that was original to the home, is this dresser. So in the George W.'s room, the bed, the shelves, the desk, and dresser were actually built into the wall, and but they were removed from the wall by later owners, and so we only have the original dresser left. And then here's George W. with the pet of the home, Mark. Mark was named for the person who gave the family the dog, Jack Markham. And according to Barbara, Mark didn't bark. We like that rhyme. Mark didn't bark. So, but George W. School still stands 6 or 7 blocks away, and he would often go early to play baseball before school. And Mark would often follow him, and George would have to bring him back and get to school on time. So, but when they moved to the next house, still here in Midland, someone steals the dog and they never see the dog again. A couple of sad stories here. My last story is actually with the White House beyond the fence. This is the garage for the house on the next street, but the owner had made it into a separate apartment, and it still is today a separate apartment. But when the Bushes lived in the home, George W.'s second grade teacher lived there. And so it was in second grade when George W. and a friend were doing an errand for the teacher. They were carrying a phonograph outside. And by chance, his mom and dad happened to be in the parking lot. And so he swears he saw his sister peek over the back seat. Of course, they were away a long time, so he asked his teacher if he can go and greet them. His teacher, being the neighbor, kind of knew what was going on, so she said yes. When he did, he found out his sister wasn't in the back seat and that she had passed away. His parents never really wanted to burden him with the fact that she may die, so the shock was a lot for him, and he often had nightmares and sleeping problems. Here are both Georges on the day after Christmas in 1954. Kind of interesting. This is how it looks today with that same mailbox and the light over it. But one of the things, if you do come and visit us, you will find that this is a almost a normal family. Many people are kind of surprised that it's just a small house, but it's a normal family that dealt with crime and sickness, but they also had a lot of laughter and joy in the house. And it just shows the beginning of a very influential family in modern history. Just recently we have a full staff and we've been planning a lot of really great events and programs for 2024. Uh, so um, One of the things that we have already started was a youth advisory council, kind of taking after the Bush's volunteerism. But the youth are from 10th to 12th grade, and they come every month and they hear people like the mayor and the city manager. They listen to the city secretary and the chief engineer, the chief of police, and so they get to hear from their viewpoint of how the youth are affected by decisions that the city made. And eventually, they'll also be doing a service project for the city as well. And then they'll end the program with a graduation. And in that graduation, they'll get a letter that will help them for college um, applications. The other thing that we're already planning is a Bush bus tour. We hope to go around the city of Midland, stop in front of places like the churches or the business offices and talk about the story there. And of course, make a stop at our place. We already, from the very beginning, when they did open the house, they started the third Thursday reading program. Of course, this is after Barbara and Laura literacy, and they call it the Robin's Reading Room after Robin. So very good. But some of our plans is to have a President's Day event on February 17th. So if you're around this area, please come and visit us. We're really looking forward to this and talking about our place in history as two of the presidents. And then during spring break, we're going to have a flat George or a flat Mark. So children can come in and color their George or Mark. If they want a dog, they can do Mark. And they want George, they can do that. And then along with the Bush bus tour, they'll go around to 6 different sites and take a picture and then come back for a prize. And then we're also, believe it or not, there's a National First Ladies Day in April. So we're going to celebrate First Ladies Day. And then we're planning a summer camp. And then next year is George H.W. Bush's 100th birthday. So there is a story of Bush coming out with Bermuda shorts, and everybody whistled at him, and that he got embarrassed and ran in. So we are going to have a Bermuda shorts and crazy sock cookout so that Bush won't be alone. You probably know that George H.W. was born in the same year that Jimmy Carter was born in. And then George W. was the only president born in the same year that 3 different presidents were born. And then the Friends group is actually planning a miniature golf fundraiser. And how that relates to us is actually George and Laura, after their barbecue at the O'Neill's house, they went miniature golfing. So this was their first date. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then September is also uh, Child Cancer Awareness Month. So we're hoping to have a health fair. We also hope to do something for 9/11 as well. It's also last Saturday in September is Worldwide Day of Play. So we're hoping to play 1950s games. And then in October is Texas Archaeology Month. So we're planning to do a Presidential Archaeology Day. And then we also will do a pumpkin walk and asking individuals and businesses to decorate pumpkins so that we can put them in the backyard and we'll vote on them. And then we'll, of course, do Christmas. And then we're also planning a junior docent program. So another high school program for high schoolers to learn speaking skills and then help us doing tours and those kind of things. We're also planning some of our own online programs. So we're really going to have a full year next year. I don't know. I feel like I spoke pretty fast. I don't even know my time. But
You're
this
good.
is a Christmas picture in the home of a. It was a later owner, but it was still a Christmas picture in the home, and so you can see that that owner put down carpet, which really was wood floors, and that's what we have today. So the floors are almost original as well in that home. But anyway, um, I'm open for any questions.
Troy, thank you so much. That was incredible, and I learned a lot that I didn't know, even though I have visited the site. So this was really interesting. And I have a question for you. What is going to happen on Presidential Archaeology Day? What does that mean? What will happen?
But luckily, that's in October, so we're still planning. But I have two new educators, by the way. Don Zavadny, who comes from Houston, and then we have Aaron Friegel, who actually studied archaeology and that. So I have been very lucky to have them. So she is planning, and she is very excited about doing that. She's also one that did online programs. So yeah, she will be doing a lot of the online programming.
Do we think that there might be an archaeological study at the site someday?
Um, I doubt that there would be anything that they would find here, but there are many archaeological digs going on in many of the presidential sites that are very important to, especially people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, to learn more about the slaves at their site and that. So it's actually a very interesting. And then so I don't know what she will have planned, but we do plan to do something presidential.
I bet we'll find a lot of little toys in that yard if we were to do
Hey,
an excavation. A
I
lot of
used,
little old cars and things like
I used
that.
to teach archaeology at the Bell County Museum, and I always explain it by using Hulk and Barbie. So you
Yes.
can really understand archaeology through Hulk and Barbie.
Well, thank you so much. We do have a couple questions in our chat for you. So let's see. So Rylan has asked, when setting up the home as a THC site, how involved were the Bush family?
Not very much. Of course, I don't know like behind the scenes, but they come back to Midland from time to time, but most of them have visited the home already. I do know that George Bush, from time to time, does offer money for donations there. Uh, I have asked him to come to the Youth Advisory Council graduation, but I don't know if he will accept or not. So.
Did I hear you say that Barbara had answered a survey about recreating the room that had been
Yeah,
George?
they did a lot of questions to them. The people that set up the house actually went to Barbara and they asked her a lot of questions and that. So, yeah, there was a lot of back and forth to make sure. And then, of course, it was Barbara and HW and Laura that cut the ribbon in the house in 2006. And then George W. visited at the end of his presidency in 2008.
That's great. Thank you for that. Let's see. We have another question. Oh, Maureen's going back to your statement about three presidents had the same birthday. Can you say that again? Which presidents were
Not the
those?
same birthday, but the same year.
Oh,
So,
same year. Okay.
um, yeah, that is Trump. Uh, Going in order, it was Trump, and then Trump was born in June of 1946. George W. was born in July of 46, and Clinton was born in August of 46.
That's great. And then also hours, your hours for your site. We will, Maureen, we will actually provide a link in our follow-up email to the site, and then the hours should be listed there. Is
Yeah,
that right, Troy?
there's going to be new hours starting January 2nd, though.
Oh,
We'll Tuesday through Saturday. That's actually a good question. Help us to advertise. Um, is Tuesday through Saturday, um, 10 to 5, with our last tour starting at 4:15. Right now, until then, we're open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 10 to 5, and our Sunday, 2 to 5, and our last tour starts at 4.
so Troy, do you find that people from the community will stop by and tell you their stories or their memories
Well, not
of the
only,
family?
but we have a lot of people that have met the Bushes, both H.W. and Barbara and George W. and Laura and Jeb and that. We have soldiers that remember either one of the presidents visiting Iraq during the wars. So they have been always described as down to earth people. It doesn't matter if it was George H.W. or George W. They've been described as down to earth people. They are always very likable. So that's very good to know, that to hear from them. I know that the last time George and Laura were here back in September, one of our board members actually met Laura, and she had a very good conversation with them. So.
That's great. We have one more question in the chat about other houses that the Bushes have lived in. Have any of those been turned into historical sites as well that you know of?
Well, the one in Odessa, but that was moved onto the site. There used to be is still there, but there's a presidential museum and they're going through a lot of changes there, but it was moved onto that site. Um, they there were talk in California to change one of the houses there into a museum, but it never came to be. Some of the houses are now in what you could call a bad neighborhood, so just never came to be. And then, of course, they never lived in very much in those houses anyway. I know that the one on Sentinel Drive, they were offered, the owners offered that house, but they offered it at a very high price. But really, I believe that the one on West Ohio, the one that we run, has more of the stories. You have two of the boys that were born there. You have Robin's story. You have George H.W. making his first million while they lived here there. And of course, George W. met a lot of his lifelong friends in that neighborhood. Even his doctor, while he was president, actually came from the next block over. So there's a lot of stories there. And so I think really we have the more important house of West Texas.
And that sort of speaks to the next question in the chat, was why was this house chosen as the historical site? Probably for those depth of connections that you just described.
And plus it was available. So.
Yes, there's always that.
But the people that opened the house, they actually did extensive remodeling, renovations in the house. They wanted to get it back. There was later owners added the carport. They added the eave over the porch. So they did a lot of, they actually added another bathroom also. So they had to do a lot of renovations to get it back. Kind of also interesting, the original people who did all of that also bought where our offices are in our gift shop. There's a really good picture of George W. I didn't show it, but George W. in the middle of the 8th Street here with our gift shop in the back that looks exactly the same. So even here, we kind of kept it like it was back then.
Mm-hmm. It's a great place. So if you guys have not been to, which I'm guessing not very many people probably have, since it's such a new site for us, but definitely put it on your tour of Texas Historical Commission sites. This was a neat one to see. Plus you get to go out to Midland, which is a treat. Okay, so Raylan's asking, how do you keep your head from spinning when trying to keep it straight between George, Barbara, Jenna?
Well, yeah, I usually, when I do my tours, I always say HW and George W. And so that's usually how I split them apart. But we need to do a little bit more on especially Neil and Jeff. But Jeff did visit the house, but he said he doesn't remember anything. So he's too young.
Too little.
So.
Do we know much about this, George's experience with school, elementary school, or anything like that?
Oh yeah,
What kind of student was he in those days?
Well, he was a troublemaker. He was the class clown. Part of that, though, when Robin died, he saw his mom often sad, so he tried to do things that to make her smile. And sometimes that got on his father's nerves. Sometimes she would just say, "That's my boy." One example, one story we do tell is down the block is Midland High School. And in 1955, while the family lived here in this house, it's just like 3 or 4 blocks down, so it's very close. But Elvis Presley did 3 concerts at that high school, and one of the stories we tell is that George W. one day at school, he drew the sideburns of Elvis on his face, and his teacher didn't think that was funny and sent him to the principal's office. So um, he did things. There's also stories of him being a troublemaker, but he was also, many of the girls actually liked him as well. Um, and then believe it or not, George W. and Laura, they actually went to the same middle school. They were in the same grade, 7th grade, but they never met there. They kind of said, "Oh, maybe I kind of knew you," but they really didn't know each other there. And also, they actually lived in the same apartment complex when they lived in Houston. George W. This was when George W. was an adult. He lived on the noisy side, and Laura was on the quiet side, but they never met there. So they only met when during that barbecue. So yeah, there's a lot actually known. The principal actually went out and played with the boys baseball and that. So, but yeah, George W. was a class clown and everybody knew it. They did say that when they talked about somebody becoming president, George W. was not on their mind.
Because of the class clownness. But
Yeah.
that's so interesting about the connection between Robin's passing and the effect that it had on the family. I don't think I ever fully understood that before.
HW, when he was president, had a painting of Robin in the Oval Office.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a very interesting, devastating thing, but you can understand, you have young children like Jeb, and that, so, and then dealing with this leukemia. And kind of interesting too, we're hoping to do a little bit more about this, but at that time was also the polio scare. So many of the friends of Robin, their parents didn't want them to get close to Robin because they didn't know enough about leukemia, and they were scared that it
Mm.
was something like polio that they would catch it. So that was also very difficult for the Bushes as well, especially.
Yeah, can imagine. Deborah is asking, do townsfolk bring stories to you to add to the history?
They do. Yeah, and one of the things we really want to do is also do kind of go around and repeat the research. A lot of the research done is a lot of those stories and that. Joe and Jan O'Neill is still active, and in fact, one of the Texas Historical Commission commissioners is actually the nephew of Jan O'Neill. So uh, he helps me a lot as well. So just a shout out for Garrett
Hmm.
Donnelly's there. But anyway, and yes, we hear a lot of stories. Yeah, I go to Rotary, and it's fun because two of them were or well, one of them was in the same class as Laura. So the class was invited to the White House for the class reunion. And so he tells a lot of stories about that.
What do people seem to be most surprised about when they visit your site?
A couple things. One, that the house is kind of smaller. Um, both Barbara and East David comes from families of wealth. Barbara's father was the editor of McCall's magazine, and that so they both come from families of wealth. So they're kind of surprised at how small the house is. But that is one of them. Another favorite is the piney wood, knotty wood paneling all over. So that's a good favorite of people. And the TV, we get a lot of questions and thoughts about the TV. And usually, if I have young children, I always ask them what the remote was and explain that it was the children, because probably all of you were the remote at one time or another. So.
It's so true. And I think you have a little phone stand there too, right? One of the vintage phone stands with the in the hallway. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um, we show the phone nook, and we have actually the phone number that the Bushes had. So one of my ideas, hopefully it will come to be, but we hope to get a rotary phone. Of course, children don't know rotary phones anyway, but if they
Exactly.
dial the number, we hope that we can get a recording of one of the Bushes, if not George W., to come on to greet them at the house. So that's also a lot of fun. And then people remember the skates in George W.'s room with the skate key and that. So yeah, this is one of the beauties of having a house from the 1950s, because uh, they either people remember that, or they remember it from the grandmother's house. That's more me. Remember a lot of stuff that they had there from the grandmother's house.
And it truly is a time capsule. The house, when you step in it, you are stepping back in time. So it really is interesting to visit. And the kids with the TV is what made me think of the rotary phone.
Right.
Yes, I could see them being very fascinated with, oh my goodness, you had to do this like this.
Let me teach them what they happens if they make a mistake. You have to
Yeah,
do it.
exactly. Okay, so we've got another question. Do they bring pictures? This is talking about townsfolk who may visit. Do they ever bring you pictures to help with the stories that they're telling?
Um, Sometimes I haven't been here long enough, I think, for people to do that. But the first people who started the home, they did a lot of research, and we have like 3 or 4 binders of pictures from the really from HW's library. But uh, they've been really helpful when I needed a picture to give us something. So we have really great access to that. But we do plan, as I said, to do a lot of research that we need to go back behind. I did a lot of research planning for the Bush bus tour. So I'm still, there's a lot of research that needs to be done to get the full story.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I mean, the full story is really there. We want to walk through and get see what else is out there, though.
So the second part of Deborah's question was, do you need to clear any stories with the Bush family before you can share them? And I would imagine that's probably more a question of just making sure the stories are accurate and doing the research. Is that right?
Yeah, that I mean, we do get a lot of people with stories that we have to make sure that coincides with the research that we have. And so we surely, I think this is Amy's site though, because there's a lot of thoughts out there. When I was Spindletop, people remembered a jail out there, but there was never a jail. So we had to make sure that we combine that with what we know already.
Yeah.
And there's actually there's a lot of discussions. Don is very good at remembering details, so we have a lot of discussions to make sure that um, we have the right story. And I'll tell you an example that we came across as the same the same interview that Barbara said poor Turbo committed suicide. She put in there that she thought that they brought in the table in the kitchen, but everything else in our research says that they didn't. So that they ate in the kitchen. So uh, just because we have one fact, we have to make sure that it coincides with a lot of others. And of course, you know, they only lived in the house for 4 years. So, and they had 30 different living situations. So it's kind of clear that maybe that was a false memory.
Yeah, and that does happen. We know how memory can be. So yeah. Um, Raylyn is asking, she says, I think you said something about this, but how many bedrooms are there in the house and how many kids were in the family when they moved away?
That's a really good question. So we have there's 3 bedrooms in in the house, and so when they first moved in, you would have HW and Barbara in 1 bedroom. You saw George W.'s bedroom. I didn't show you Robin's bedroom just because there's a lot of it's all baseball, so I showed you the baseball pictures. But Robin's bedroom, the parents took out the middle door when Robin got sick. So when she passed away, that bedroom became Jeb's and Neil's bedroom. At first, Jeb actually, his nursery was in the playroom off the side of the living room. But then I guess when she passed away, they moved it in there.
So how many children was that when they moved
So
out?
when they moved from the house, they still only had 3. They would have
Okay,
had George W., Neil, and Jeb.
Jeb.
And
Okay,
Mark was born the next house.
gotcha.
That kind of going back to another what you asked before, another surprise of people is they didn't know they had 6 children altogether.
I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure that I knew that. So yes.
Neil and Marvin is usually it's like who are they? So
Yeah, it's interesting. All the things that you think you know, and then you travel to a historic site, or we come to a presentation like this, and so many more details are filled in, and suddenly you realize what you don't know, right?
right. Well, and I would say one of the things about the Bush family, um, first of all, we don't deal with politics. That's the library job. We don't deal with that. But if you even think of Jenna and Barbara and that generation, the next generation, you also have Neil's daughter, Lauren Bush, who married Ralph Lauren's son. So she became Lauren Bush Lauren or Lauren Lauren. I love that. But she was in fashion and that. So the next generation is also very active in America as well.
Hmm. Yeah, the ripple effects continue to go. Well, we've reached the end of the questions that I see in the chat. Is there anyone in the audience that might want to pop off mute and make a comment or share a memory or ask a question? Please go ahead and do that now. And I will say I loved how many connections there are in your presentation back to the holiday season. I was surprised that you found so many connections to talk about.
That was yeah, when you asked me to do this, I'm like, oh no, what do we have? But luckily the binders had a lot of their pictures by year, so that was very helpful.
And
And
having
I
that,
beyond the 1959.
mhm,
That's when they moved to Houston, by the way. It's 1959.
got it. Thank you. Okay, well, Kimberly is saying thank you. And I guess if there's no more comments, we can call it a wrap. So I'll give it one more chance in the chat. So if you've got any last minute things, while you're thinking of last comments and questions, let me encourage you all to please do visit our website and sign up for our February event. It'll be on February 1st. Most of you heard me talk about this at the beginning, but this is going to be a very interesting event. Russell Lee was a famous photographer that traveled all around the United States, but this famous quote that we have in the title of this presentation is one of the best states of all. He really enjoyed his time coming through Texas, and the photographs are incredible. So we can't wait to share those with you and to hear the story of Russell Lee. So you can find information about that on our website. So thcfriends.org, and just look under events and you'll see virtual events.
I
Well,
want to say one more thing, just
please.
now that you said that. One good way to find more information is also be a friend on one of our social media pages on Instagram or Facebook. We put in a lot of extra information, and that's probably many of the TAC sites. They always have a Throwback Thursday. Ours is a Monday moment, history moment. So, but we have a lot of information on there. So, if you want to become friends on our Facebook, that really gives you a lot of extra information as well.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I don't know if most people realize that the THC, Texas Historical Commission, has a Facebook page, but each historic site has their own Facebook page. So if there's a particular historic site that you're interested in, definitely follow them on social media, because you'll get a much more close, one-on-one experience there. You'll learn a lot of details and be aware of a lot of programming that's going on that you may want to attend or know more about. So thanks for bringing that up, Troy. That's a great point. And I will also try to put links to that in my follow-up email that I will send out tomorrow. And yes, Troy, if you have any additional resources that might be of interest to our audience, we can put links to that when I send out the email as well. Maybe a biography that you know of that's particularly good, or something related to the house. We'll definitely provide a link to the site, so you'll be able to check that out. There's a lot of thank yous going on in the chat, Troy. I hope you're able to see those. And Valerie's saying, thanks, Troy. Nice follow-up for the tour you gave at my Port Isabel Lighthouse State Historic Site group last summer. Well done.
I saw a hand up from Ray, I think.
Was that a wave or a question? I didn't see it, so.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope we'll see you at the next one in February. Take care, everyone. Troy, thank you again. This was great. Happy holidays, everyone.
Same to you.
Thanks.